Okay, we're back with another video. We're going to be doing another slavery apologetic video. This is a new one. We haven't covered Mike Winger yet, but he's pretty large in the apologetic community. Um, One thing that I decided I'm going to do is create this little checklist that I got up in the top right here. And we're going to see as we start going over different slavery apologetics, we're going to go through and see just how awful the apologetics are. We're going to give them a little score, 1 to 10, 1 being not so bad, 10 being the worst. I wish I would have done this previously because I think I might have already covered the worst when the dude from, what was it, Got Questions said that I can't, that slavery was a form of adoption when you sell your daughter into slavery, that it's just like adopting. It was awful. He would have gotten a 10 for sure. But I don't know what Mike Winger is going to have to say about slavery, but I do have a little checklist here, and we'll see how many he hits, and then we'll give him a rating at the end based off of how awful it was. So if they just give the basic apologetics that, was this or was that, they might get a lower score. But it's when they try to sell you that it was actually a good thing. That's when it gets 5 plus. So we're going to get into it. Let's see what Mike Winger has to say. Biblical slavery in a nutshell.
Back in the day, it was actually an indentured servitude. It was less than.
We're going to start that from the beginning.
How did slavery exist typically in Israel back in the day? It was actually an indentured servitude. It was less than a slave, like you
we're
kidnapped and brought over and you're put into service. Rather, it was more
10
of an
seconds in, and
or a
we got not actual slavery
for a contract period of time. It really was. It was a contracted period of time. It was voluntary rather than starving.
Geez, voluntary.
Say, hook myself up with someone who had the money. I would say, I will serve you for X number of years if you provide for me housing and clothing and perhaps a wage above and beyond that. You can think of Jacob and Laban as being an example of this.
All right, so we'll stop here for just a moment. We'll kind of go over what he's said so far, that it was voluntary and that it was kind of a form of indentured servitude. But if you are a father and you sell your daughter into slavery, how is it voluntary for her? That seems like a pretty involuntary form of this indentured servitude that he's already making. So we can scratch out anything else that makes this form of indentured servitude voluntary, but when the daughter is sold possibly against her will, it's already involuntary. So you cannot say that this form of indentured servitude was voluntary. Nor do I think that indentured servitude would include possession, ownership of another human being, but that's for a different video.
Jacob leaves. Esau is chasing him. He's got nothing, just the clothes on his back, basically. He finds Laban. He ends up coming into a 7-year contract with him. 7 years was the maximum. Right, and then so he gets in the 7-year contract with him.
7 year was the maximum, except for the people that you could own for life and pass down to your children. Or if you have a slave and you give him a wife, and he decides you get to keep the women, but if you get to keep the women and the children. Sorry, I'm trying to bring this up off of memory. I haven't gone over slavery apologetics in a little while, but if you sell yourself into slavery, as he would put it, and then the slave master gives his slave a wife, they have kids. After his contract is up, he gets to go free, but the women and children have to stay. When do they go free? Who knows? But if he decides to stay with his family, which most people probably would, then he is now a slave for life. 7 years when the contract ends. I don't think so. In some cases, yes. In a lot of cases, no. But the problem with this form of apologetics is he's not going to mention all the other ways to keep it's a loophole of this to keep your slave for life, but he's not going to mention those. And that's the biggest problem I have with apologetics, is they just try to sugarcoat everything, but won't go over the actual hard stuff. Let's keep going.
And then he gets his pay changes, and Laban was a bad owner. He would have been rebuked under the Old Testament law. But there's an example of how somebody moved into that position. it was caused by poverty, not racial status.
Oh, we got another one. Not race based. He's hitting him off quick.
It was not caused by racial status, but by poverty. There was no rape involved in God's regulations of slavery. Firstly, because rape was punishable by death, and you had the same law for the slave as you did for the free in Israel.
Okay, so rape was punishable by death. In some cases, yes, rape was punishable by death. But generally speaking, when this rape was punishable by death, it was only if you raped a virgin who was set to be married. If you weren't a virgin, the punishment was not death. They held virginity to such a high standard. More specifically, God held virginity to such a high standard back in the day. It's weird. But I wouldn't say that it's not that the if you're talking about like Exodus 20:21, I want to say the Hebrew slave laws, then it doesn't say anything about rape in there unless you sell your daughter and she doesn't please him. Like, what do you think this means? That if you take a wife and she's not pleasing you, what do you think all this means? But as far as he's semi correct that um um so actually like what he says here. Uh See, they sneak this tricky language in. It's obnoxious. Okay, so as far as the Hebrew laws were concerned and how to treat your slave, no, not explicitly said was rape involved. I don't know why he's talking about rape, like trying to sell it as a good thing. Like, yeah, you could own people, but hey, you couldn't rape them. Like, all right, well, that's great. I would argue that in some circumstances you probably could, or that if she wasn't willing, you could just boot the slave out the door when you sell the daughter into servitude. But see this word he's sneaking in right here? I'm going to read the subtitles on the screen. It says, and you had the same laws for the slave as you did for the free in Israel. Is this a way to say that these laws only apply to Hebrew slaves? I would argue probably yes. He's trying to sneak that in there without explicitly saying it, because you could go and if you like conquered a city, or even if you tried to wage war on a city, and they surrendered, or they didn't want war, they surrendered immediately, you could go through and you could, if you found a woman attractive, you could make her your wife. And if she you got to give her like, I don't know, it was like 2 weeks or 30 days or whatever to mourn the fact that you just slaughtered her family, but then she has to be your wife. I can't imagine one single circumstance where if you go in and you murdered somebody's family and you took the lone survivor to be your wife, and then you got married, I can't imagine there's any form of consensual intercourse after you just slaughtered her family. Anything that takes place after that's probably going to be forced. But we'll keep going.
There was also no sex outside of marriage. So there would be no outside of marriage fornication allowed, whether they were a slave or not a slave. And if they were married, if a master or whatever you want to,
I mean, you could say that it wasn't allowed, but that doesn't mean it wasn't happening. Because if it was happening, then why would there be different rape laws for virgins and non-virgins who were not set to be married or whatever?
call him, married the servant girl, then the Bible requires that he give her the full status of a wife, and he's not allowed to just divorce her. So he can't do.
He shall. Okay, hold on. Let's go back a little bit.
Then the Bible requires that he give her the full a master or whatever you want to call him, married the servant girl. Then the Bible requires that he give her the full.
I don't want to outright say that no, there's no circumstance where this happens, but where's the? I wish you would provide some Bible verses so we can actually go over them. Is he talking about when you, if you buy somebody's daughter, that if you get married, that she gets the rights of a wife, whatever those may have been in that time? Probably not anything good. Yeah, but if she's not pleasing him, then he can just give him to his son. which by the way, that's a form of adoption if you didn't know.
Full status of a wife, and he's not allowed to just divorce her. So he can't do this like one night stand kind of thing. No, but he has to give her the full status of a wife. So it actually elevated her rights dramatically.
Well, we hit another one. So do I want to check this off? That was some type of improvement. It elevated her rights. It was a protection. And he's not really talking about slavery in this, so I'm gonna leave those unchecked for now. Let's see if he says that the actual slave was.
Here's one of the laws in Israel: he who kidnaps a man and sells him, or if he's found in.
All right, we're gonna add another one into this list. Oh, he hit not lifelong, didn't he? Yeah, he did. We're gonna add this whole. I'm gonna call out what he's saying, and that slave trading, put to death. I'm gonna assume that he's like, the Bible condemns slave trading because kidnappers are supposed to be put to death. This was a law that I would argue very strongly protected Israelites, so you couldn't go kidnap your fellow Israelite and make him a slave. This law definitely did not protect other nations, which that's why I have this one as last, to see if he actually mentioned slavery throughout this whole spiel. But I'm gonna say right now that he's gonna say slave traders are to be put to death. We'll keep going. We'll see if I'm right.
In his hand shall surely be put to death.
Yeah.
This is an important law in Israel. Kidnapping was dealt with very seriously. It wasn't a $5,000 fine and up to 6 months in jail. You would die. If you kidnapped somebody, you were to be put to death, executed through capital punishment. This one law, this single law, would make New World slavery completely impossible, because so much of it was fueled by kidnapping. That's Exodus 21:16. Notice.
What did he just say?
Single law would make New World slavery completely impossible.
This single law would make New World slavery? I mean, only if it was kidnapping. What about like war captives? What about, I mean, what if you didn't do the kidnapping? What if you just bought from kidnappers? You know what I mean? Like, there's so many ways around it. Okay, but again, this applied to your fellow Israelites. This did not apply to the nations that surround you,
because so much of it was fueled by kidnapping.
So we're going to check
That's
that
Exodus
one off.
21:16. Notice that if you're either the kidnapper or the guy that's found with the kidnapped victim, he who kidnaps a man and sells him, or if he's found in his hand, he shall be put to death. So you could be the guy that has these slaves on your plantation, and you're like, well, I didn't kidnap him. Tough. This would not work.
So he's lying. That's a lie. The verse actually reads, I don't want to pull it up. You can go read it. Exodus 21. He just brought it up. But the verse actually reads something more like, anyone who kidnaps a man, whether he has sold him or he is still in the kidnapper's possession, is to be put to death. Not if you have a slave who was kidnapped by somebody else. It just says if you kidnap someone, whether or not you have already sold the slave, or if he is still with you, that you are to be put to death. He absolutely lied just right there. That's not what the verse says.
What about abuse? What about when the slaves were being abused?
Oh, let's get into it. Exodus 21 verse 26, 27 says.
Well, Exodus 21 verse 26 and 27, it says, if a man strikes the eye of his male or female servant and destroys it or damages.
You're not going to get away with this. If you're going to say that if a man strikes, and again, remember, Exodus 21 applies to your fellow Hebrew slaves, this form of indentured servitude that he's talking about. But he better go into the one where you can beat them as long as you don't kill them. And mind you, these are commandments from God. This isn't the laws of the land locally. This is what God says you can do. So if he's going to cover this verse, he ought to cover the one where it says that you can beat them, you just can't kill them. Imagine what you can do to somebody to inflict pain before they die.
damages their eyes so they can't see. He shall let them go free for the sake of his eye. And if he knocks out the tooth of his male or female servant, he shall let him go free for the sake of his tooth. Now, is God only concerned with eyes and teeth? Or it seems to be that the point is, if he does some sort of serious permanent bodily harm to this person.
So you just can't do serious permanent bodily harm. I mean, you can still cause some, you can do some serious bodily harm. It just seems like it might not be permanent. And again, it only applies to your fellow Israelites.
Although
This is God saying that you can own another human being for a set amount of time and you can strike them, you can hit them, you can inflict pain upon them. You just can't kill them. That's God.
wouldn't consider losing a tooth to be seriously, but your point is it demonstrates abuse. Then he goes free. They go free. They break the contract and they go completely free. This also would be really protective and really actually elevating the rights of the.
All right, we definitely hit that one now. We'll say an improvement and protection. So the only one that so far, if he mentions more that are common, and I don't have on this list, I'm going to add them into the list. But he's hit them all so far. But let's see if he mentions the actual the chattel slavery that's in the Bible. I don't think he's going to mention it, but we'll see.
Those who were servants during that time. Verses 20 and 21 says this. And here's one the critics will quote in wrongly.
Okay,
I think,
cool. He is bringing this up.
And if a man beats his male or female servant with a rod, so that he dies under his hand, he shall surely be punished. Notwithstanding, if he remains alive a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his property.
How can you give? How can you try to make a presentation that this was any type of good when it ends with "for he is his property"? We're talking about a human being here, and he is his property. You can leave the rest of this out. But if you just leave in the fact that a human being was property to another human being, and this is what God has commanded as the laws to govern slaves, it's already terrible. I'm curious what he's going to say. Let's keep going.
So let me dig into this, because here's what the skeptics say. You can beat them within an inch of their life and it's okay. You get off scot-free, but that's really...
Maybe, but why does it have to go to within an inch of their life? What if you just strike them on the back with a whip 15, 30, 100 times? You know what I mean? You don't have to beat them within an inch of their life. The fact that you can beat them at all is disgusting. It's immoral. And this is from God.
Not the context of the passage. Let's look at it. First off, if he beats the servant and they die, he shall be punished. That is the word nakam, and it's specifically used regarding the death penalty.
I can't say that that's not true because I don't know, but there's plenty of passages that say that you shall be put to death, and this says that you shall be punished. I can't imagine that they're used interchangeably.
The point here
could be
is
wrong.
that just because you are the quote-unquote master, you don't get off scot-free.
You know what? We're looking it up. What does he say is the word here?
If he beats the servant and they die, he shall be punished. That is...
Nakam, N-A-Q-U-M. All right, let's look it up. Was it N-A-Q-U-M? N-A-Q-A-M. Nakam, Hebrew. Nakam. Okay, BibleHub.com. To avenge, take vengeance, avenger, exact, execute, punish, revengeful, take, vengeance. Vengeance will be taken. So I'm going to say that no, he's wrong. He's lying. I don't see, you could argue that one time it's used execute, but 9 times it's used as avenge. avenged, avenger, avenging, so some type of just retribution. I would argue that he is in fact lying. They Let's go back just a little bit.
Okay, you get off scot-free, but that's really not the
I just want to make sure that he says that nakam means to be put to death.
context of the passage. Let's look at it. First off, if he beats the servant and they die, he shall be punished. That is the word nakam, and it's specifically used regarding the death penalty. The point here is that just because you are the quote-unquote master, you don't.
So it's used regarding the death penalty. Oh boy, do we want to look up what word it uses when it says that they shall be put to death? I don't want to. You can look it up if you want, but I'm going to go with that. It was just some type of vengeance should be taken upon whoever it's referring to. The definition to avenge or take vengeance. He shall be punished. So this is giving us a list of when it was used. Okay, thank you, Bible Hub. I'm gonna have to look this up. Nakam. So vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. Cain sevenfold. Cain is avenged sevenfold. Shall be avenged. Exodus. He shall surely be punished. Vengeance. For he is money. Vengeance. Which will execute vengeance upon you shall avenge. Okay. Yeah, I'm wholeheartedly convinced that he just made this up. He's absolutely lying. He made this up just now. Nakam is not referenced as
they die, he shall be punished. That is specifically the word nakam, and it's specifically used regarding the death penalty.
I didn't see it once. I haven't seen it once here. Judges, I shall surely take vengeance on you. Avenged. No, he's lying. He made this up. He gets he's a 5 so far.
The point here is that just because you are the quote unquote
definitely if you just straight flat out lie, you automatically start at a 5. Automatically.
Master, you don't get off scot-free.
Dishonest scale.
If you kill someone, you get the death penalty, and that applies if they're a slave or if they're not. So then they go, well, but if they don't die, you can beat them with an inch of their life. Well, no. Let's read this in context, because we just read a few verses back that what? If there is a beating, a loss of a tooth, loss of the use of the eye, or something along those lines, they go free. So what is this verse 20?
But you can absolutely beat somebody without causing permanent injury or beating them with an inch of their life that would still inflict a severe amount of pain. Just imagine, what is the likelihood that somebody will die if you shove like a toothpick under their fingernails? Pretty low. But how painful is that? Was that allowed? I don't know. Maybe. This is, just imagine some circumstances where you don't actually have to kill somebody or inflict some type of like permanent damage, like the eye or the tooth, or like, yeah, you can cut off somebody's hand and they won't die, but we can take all that out, this permanent bodily harm. Imagine the temporary bodily harm you can inflict on somebody without killing them. Some of it, you could argue, would probably make them wish that they were dead, especially if you're going through years of it or lifelong, or knowing that your children are going to be inflicted with this pain. Come on, it's all disgusting.
Anyone really mean? Notwithstanding, if he remains alive a day or two, he shall not be punished. Nakam, he shall not be put to death, for he is his property. Because
what did he just say? Nakam, he shall not be put to death? Okay, now I'm just confused. Because he just said, maybe he misspoke here, or maybe he misspoke previously, but this is incompatible. He just said, we just went over this whole long thing that he said nakam was used specifically when it was talking about the death penalty, and it just meant to avenge. And now a day or two, he shall not be punished. Nakam, he shall not be put to death. Maybe I misheard him earlier, but I'm not going back.
He shall not be punished. Nakam, he shall not be put to death, for he is his property. Because what's going to happen? He's going to lose this servant. So there's your punishment. You just lost the money. Say you had a work contract. I'm going to give you such and such, and you're going to serve me for this much time. Well, I've defaulted the contract. Here's your money. Bye. I'm out. And so it becomes
What?
a protective device.
All right. Is this Mike Winger's first time giving slavery apologetics? I have no idea what he's talking about right now. How old is this video? Am I going 5 years? I mean, it's kind of an old video. Maybe he's gotten better at it, but I don't know what did he just say? I'm going to give you such and such, and you're going to serve me for this time.
Such, and you're going to serve me for this much time. Well, I've defaulted.
Oh, we didn't go back far enough.
So then they go, well, but if they don't die, you can beat them within an inch of their life. Well, no. Let's read this in context, because we just read a few verses back that what? If there is a beating, a loss of a tooth, loss of the use of the eye, or something along those lines, they go free. So what is?
I mean, he just put loss of a tooth, loss of an eye, and beating all in the same category. He snuck that word in there, this beating, because you can beat them. Now the loss of a tooth, loss of an eye, yeah, he would get set free. But he threw beating in there as well, and it does not say that. In fact, it clearly says that you can do this.
What does this verse 21 really mean? Notwithstanding, if he remains alive a day or two, he shall not be punished. No, he shall not be put to death, for he is his property. Because what's going to happen? He's going to lose this.
How is he going to lose this servant if he beats him and he doesn't die within a day or two? It says he shall not be punished. He's making no sense right now. And I figured maybe I just misheard him, or maybe he was misspeaking, maybe. But no, he's just making no sense. Because you can beat them and there will be no punishment, because what's going to happen? He's going to lose this servant. No, he is not. If he beats him and he doesn't die, and assuming that he doesn't cause any egregious bodily harm, then he shall not be punished. What are you talking about, Mike?
Servant.
What are you talking about?
So there's your punishment. You just lost the money. Say you had a work contract. I'm going to give you such and such, and you're going to serve me for this much time. Well, I've defaulted the contract. Here's your money. Bye. I'm out.
Okay, so he's up to a 6 now, because he just he just conflated that he's almost arguing that you can't beat them at all, because if you do, they go free. You just lost out. But you can beat them. You just can't cause them permanent bodily harm. But he's conflating those two things and making them seem like they're one, and you just can't beat them at all, or you're going to lose out on your money. Mike, you got to do better than this, man. You're not the worst as this just disgusting apologist, but you're one of the worst as making any sense or trying to make it make sense. Slippery. You're slippery, Mike. Let's keep going.
And so it becomes a protective device for the servants. Deuteronomy 23 verses 15
Man, he doubled
and 16
down on the
talk about
protective.
This. It says, "You shall not give back to his master the slave who has escaped from his master to you." Let me read that again. "You shall not give back to his master the slave who has escaped from his master to you. He may dwell with you in your midst, in the place which he chooses within one of your gates, where it seems best to him. You shall not oppress him."
So, if I remember correctly, this is talking about if from other nations. If there's a slave from another nation and he escapes that slave and comes to you, you shall not oppress him. I mean, I don't care about this. This is dumb.
Wow. Why would this be going on? This doesn't make sense, right? Well, it's because if the master was violating rules or being abusive or being somehow harsh or ungodly to the servant, then they could flee, and the other people in Israel are required to help them hide, to let them.
I can almost guarantee that if we were to bring up that verse and go over the passage fully, that we could probably point out where he's lying, but I don't feel like doing that. Maybe, should we? Should I? Maybe at the end we'll do it. Let's see how long. I don't want this video to be too long.
To help them hide, to let them, you want a place? Okay, let's try to help you set up a place over here, over here, over there. That was required under this Old Testament system that is, yes, it's regulating slavery, but in a way that seems to be only meant to bring godliness into the picture, to bring protection and bring help.
All right, this is
But now let's
boring.
look at the New Testament. What about the New Testament? Um,
All right, I don't really care what the New Testament has to say about slavery because slavery is already well established in the Old Testament. You can't escape it. You can't get away from it. I don't want to hear this old covenant. I don't buy the whole old covenant, new covenant. I don't buy it. Because if your God is the objective standard of morality, then the Old Testament laws still have to be moral laws. Or I shouldn't say moral laws, but laws that are moral. Unless he changed his mind, in which case your God is no longer objective. If you are a believer in the Trinity, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, so the Father is the Son. They're three separate, but they're also one, which makes no sense. But we're gonna give it to him. So they're one. So Jesus is God. You can't separate the two. So if God says back in the day in the Old Testament that this is the way that things are going to go, then Jesus is also saying that because they're the same person. Um, I don't buy it, but we'll keep going with
New
what he has to
Testament
say.
slavery did exist, but it wasn't a Hebrew thing; it was a Roman thing, and it didn't have the regulations of God on it at all. So there are no regulations given in the New Testament because God was not starting a nation.
There are no. What I just heard him say is that God had a massive opportunity to correct all of the absolutely terrible things from the Old Testament, and he said,
There was no national laws given in the New Testament, but rather individual personal laws. How should I behave? How should I behave, right?
slaves, obey your masters, especially the cruel ones.
So there's advice given to those who are slaves that is not, however, an endorsement of their slavery. For instance, we are given advice if we're persecuted. If you're persecuted, do this, do that. Does that mean that it's good for people to persecute Christians? No. And so the fact that we have advice to those who were enslaved is not an endorsement.
But all right, Mike. Wow. So yes, it's not an endorsement. I'll agree with him on that. It's not just because you say but if you were to say Christians, if you are persecuted, uh obey your persecutors, especially the harsh persecutors.
Of their slavery. But 1 Timothy 1:10, check this out. Here's another verse about kidnapping. It says, fornicators, sodomites, kidnappers, liars, perjurers, and if there's any other thing contrary to sound doctrine, saying the law is for these people. And who's on the list? Kidnappers.
So this is another. So why do they always leave homosexuals out of that list? It annoys me to no end, especially if I'm coming from somebody like Mike Winger, who I haven't watched a lot of his videos yet, but I have him in my saved playlist, or watch later. I mean, I know that he doesn't like the progressive Christian, the gays. I know he doesn't like that. He thinks that it's a sin. So I'm a little surprised that even he left out homosexuals because autoplay no fornicators, sodomites. Oh, he says sodomites. Okay, so he's going from the NKJV. Okay, my bad. I was wrong. He threw it in there. Sodomites. Um, I apologize. You got it.
The law is for these people. And who's on the list? Kidnappers. And
so sodomites. What he means is homosexuals.
this is a word that had the connotation of slave traders, whether that would be for a sex slave trade or for some other kind of slave trade. This is a wicked, detestable act, Old Testament through New Testament.
Right along with being gay.
No God-fearing Christian should ever be caught having anything to do with it. And we should all be ready to stand against it if at all possible. The scripture throughout, it condemns the elements of slavery that made slavery so wrong. The kidnapping, the forced elements of it.
No, it didn't. It didn't. Even if you just look at Exodus, you still have daughters who are being sold. How is that not forced?
Condemns the violence or the abuse or the rape.
It doesn't condemn the abuse. It gives specific laws on how you can do the abuse. there are various forms of laws specifically regarding slavery that that I would absolutely argue would be some form of rape. Sex slavery, okay.
Or the sex slavery type of stuff that's
It's so it's hard to distinguish between when you're talking about sex slavery. I don't think the Bible outright condones this form of sex slavery in the same context of like an indentured servitude or a laborer. But I mean, you can go and you can absolutely exterminate an entire town and keep all the virgins to yourself. Um, I would definitely argue that that's a form of sex slavery.
gone on. It condemns throughout all that type of thing. And then it also endorses the fact that with God, there's no partiality. There's just no partiality. Slave free, they're all the same to the Lord.
In the New Testament, yeah, but you still have slaves and you still have free. Just condemn the slavery. I'll make it really simple. Don't own other human beings as property. That was it. That's all that needed to be said. Not Exodus 21, 40 through what 20, whatever, all these different Deuteronomies and Leviticuses and Timothys, and you don't need any of that. Commandment number 1, Exodus 20. The 10 Commandments. Exodus 20, part 1, verse 1. Don't own other human beings as property. Nothing else needs to be said. That's it. You're done. But we all know how that went.
And he will judge each one individually. Acts chapter 17, verse 26 says that God has made us all from one blood. He has made from one blood every nation of men. Every nation's been made from one blood. Even the idea of racism is kind of strange, right? Because, I mean, how many races are there? We're humans, there's like, that's it, we're humans.
What was so funny right there? He cracked
I wish we could
up.
Get on a big lineup, just everybody from like the whitest white guy in the world, like to the darkest black person on the planet, right? And then have everybody in between, like just showing there isn't this clear cut, like here's these people and here's those people and here's those. We're just this great variety of human.
I mean, for the most part, I would agree with what he's saying. I think race is largely a social construct, and it doesn't really have anything to do with anything except for the color of your skin. But what is he talking about right now? Get back to the slavery, dude.
And there's really no significant difference between them. None. We're all made
agree.
in the image of God. And we're all made from
BS.
one blood. We all come from Adam and Eve. And so
all right. Well, he was almost on a roll there, and then he did what he did. Okay.
That discounts the whole idea of racism, which of course fueled slavery back then.
So if he says that we're all one blood, we're all one people, we're all made in the image of God, we're all the same, they're all equal, we're all this, we're all that. I'm curious if he feels that exact same way about gays. Probably not. All right, I'm gonna give him a 6 out of 10. He wasn't the worst. He hit everything in the checklist. He did outright lie, and he does not mention. We can hit that. So he hit the entire checklist. If you feel that there's anything else that needs to be added to this checklist as far as apologetic for slavery that you've heard countless and countless times that you think needs to be on this list to see if these apologists are going to hit it, leave it in the comments. I'll add it to the list. I'm going to keep doing this kind of content. I'm going to switch it up, do different things every once in a while. The slavery apologetics do get a little bit boring and stale because they're all the same. Every once in a while, I'll get thrown a little surprise where they say that like slavery is adoption or whatever. But generally speaking, they're all the same. So I'm giving this guy a 6 out of 10 on the dishonesty scale, the bad apologist scale. I don't got a name for it yet. Hey, if you got a good name for this scale, leave it in the comments. We'll put it as the title. But he did hit every single one on the list, but he didn't outright try to say that this was somehow like the most glorious thing that ever came out of God's creation, which some apologists seem to do. So 6 out of 10 for the bad apologist scale, slavery apologist scale. If you're enjoying any of my content, please like, subscribe. If you've made it this far, you must be at least interested in listening to me blab on aimlessly for 40 minutes now about slavery and apologetics. Hit me, subscribe to my channel, throw a like on this video, help me get out in that algorithm. All right, yep, till the next one.